We'll call this meeting to order. I see we have a quorum tonight, and can we get an approval of the agenda, please?
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda.
Okay, all in favor, show of hands. Okay. We have a full agenda today, and we're going to start with Mr. Watts on the fiscal year 2022 budget hearing.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We'd also like to thank the audience, Madam Superintendent, everyone in attendance for coming out and joining in with us for our second budget hearing. And Madam President, I see that also, as you stated, you have a pretty full agenda, so I'll probably go a little faster tonight and maybe give a little abbreviated hearing this time. The first budget hearing was last week on the 7th of September, and of course, we went to the budget in great detail. However, tonight is probably going to be a little bit more. We're probably going to do it more so in a summary than we did last time. It's the PowerPoint on. Again, this is our fiscal year 2022 proposed budget seeking board approval. The law requires that we present 2 budget hearings before the public. And of course, these hearings are for the benefit of the public, so we certainly encourage public input. Our budget for fiscal year 2022 is a situation where we sit down with a number of department heads, the superintendent, board members constantly make suggestions. So we talk to an array of folk regarding their input in putting together the budget. So it's not a situation where you have a group of accountants sitting down and putting together a budget. No, we want the input from the public. We want inputs from principals and from teachers. So we seek all of that input so that we could combine the information, look at our allocation, and determine what the budget allocation should be. Go ahead. Oh, okay. She said I should step out in front. Okay. Now, while we do encourage public input, there are also things that we have to keep in mind. And of course, we look at budget constraints. We look at allocations for the various funding sources. We also have to be in legal compliance, such as laws and regulations set forth by the U.S. Department of Education, along with regulations set forth by SACS. I think the name now is Cognia. Also, our state legislature and State Department of Education also provides numerous laws, and we have to be within the boundaries of those laws. A couple of things that we are required to do is something called local fund match. We'll receive over $100 and something million from what is called the State's Foundation Program. However, in order for us to receive those funds, we'll be required to put up out of our own local tax revenues almost $26 million. And that is just to participate in the State's Foundation Program. We'll also receive over $7 million from the State Capital Purchase Program. But in order to participate in that program, we have to put up over $1.1 million of our own local tax revenues in order to participate in this particular program. So there are also various funding matches that we have to do in order to participate in various fund sources. I'd just like to recognize just a few of the district highlights going into fiscal year 2022. The number one is the district has obtained the state required 1-month fund balance over the last 3 years. In fact, we're projecting by the end of fiscal year 2022 that we will have beyond a 3-month fund balance. Now, currently our fund balance requirement is about $18-point-something million. Next year it'll be $19-point-something million. So we're projecting to end fiscal year 2022 with over $60 million in revenues. And of course, you see some of the other things that the superintendent, the board, and the finance department has done over the last several years. Of course, one of the things that we're proud of, we're continuing to provide professional development to all of our principals, bookkeepers, various department heads, coaches, and so forth. And I think we'll recognize a lot of that when you hear the fiscal year 2020 audit that'll be coming out very, very soon. One of the other things that we've done this year, we've updated our athletic salary supplement, and we're proposing this board meeting on an academic supplement schedule. We believe that we need to invest more monies in our academic programs, curriculum programs. Just want our students to be exposed to many more opportunities. So that is something that we're looking very, very forward to. Many of you all know that the state provided all employees with a 2% pay raise for fiscal year 2022. Well, because the district, we saw where we could do a few more things for some of our support staff, so the district provided an 8% increase for the grand majority of our support staff. So in all, most of our support staff will receive about a 10% increase. Also, our bus drivers, we felt that we need to be a little bit more competitive with bus drivers' salaries. Of course, one of the problems we were facing is that many of the other school districts in the surrounding area, as soon as we train our bus drivers, they got their CDL, then other school districts will hire them away from us. So we increased our salary schedule by 13.5% for our bus drivers. Now again, the state is already providing a 2% increase, so in all, our bus drivers will be receiving a 15.5% increase. Okay. And of course, along with many of the accomplishments we have, of course, we have a few challenges as well. One of the major challenges is having enough funding, and we'll just look at the last bullet, have enough funding to meet all of the demands for building renovations, security upgrades, deferred maintenance, technology upgrades, and so forth. I'm sure many of you have heard over the last several years that we were over $250 million in deferred maintenance. Well, if you have $250 million in deferred maintenance a few years ago, you can imagine what it would be now. So we are concerned about having enough money to be able to meet those needs. Of course, we are very, very thankful to the taxpayers of Montgomery for investing in education with a new increased ad valorem tax, in which we'll start recognizing those revenues in October of 2023. So this fiscal year 2024, in which we'll start recognizing those revenues. Of course, I am concerned about we having enough money to do all the things we need to do. One of the other major components that I'm really concerned about is our declining student population. I think this is one of the biggest threats to the continuous funding of Montgomery Public Schools, and that is we need to find a way to stabilize our student population. Otherwise, we'll continue to see a reduction in revenues. For back, it was click. Okay, there we see a chart of our student population over the last several years. And we see we've lost student population from 31,704 to about 27,000 for the number of children that will be funded on for fiscal year 2022. Anytime you see a loss of students, then you certainly will see a loss in funding, because our funding is tied to the number of students, or basically tied to our student population. All school districts operate on basically 5 financial funds. First, there's the general fund. The general fund speaks to the general operations of the school district and will consist mostly of our state revenues and our local revenues. Our largest source of funds has come from what is called the State's Foundation Program. the state's foundation program. This is the fund that I was just speaking of, in which we have to match about $26 million to participate in that particular fund source. Of course, that is part of the general fund. Our local tax revenues, the ad valorem of property taxes, that's considered general fund. Special revenue funds are mainly our federal dollars. We receive dollars called Title I, Title II, food service dollars. Along with this year, we did receive quite a bit of.
Yeah, I'm just make sure to keep this away from you.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. Over the last year, and of course this year, we did receive quite a bit of our stimulus type monies. These were monies that was used to help us address the COVID situation throughout the nation. And of course, we received over 130 million, we projected to receive over $130 million for fiscal year 2022. We also received about $58 million this year, which we projecting to spend about half of that in 21 and the other half in 22. Capital Projects Fund, of course, speaks to the building renovations of our schools. So it's basically the construction, renovations, and building of schools. Then we have Debt Service Fund, the payment of long-term debt. We do have a few bond issues in which we are paying long-term debt expenses for that. Also, Fiduciary Fund speaks to what is called non-public local school activities. Now, you have also public school activities, which is part of the Special Revenue Fund. And the difference between both of those, both the monies are raised at the school level. Of course, monies that are raised at the school level, that is for all of the students, will be special revenue funds. Monies that are raised for a particular class or a particular club will be fiduciary funds, such as the FBLA club. I'm sure many of us participated in various clubs while we were in school, in high school, middle school, or whatever. The business club would be another club that would be a fiduciary fund activity. Okay, there we see a breakdown of our entire budget, and I'll kind of talk about each one of those funds somewhat quickly. We see we're projecting to receive about $250 million in our general fund for fiscal year 2022. And we see state sources makes up about $174 million of those state sources. Now, out of that $173 million, the grand majority of that is what is the state's foundation program funds. The same funds that I was speaking of, in which we have to provide about a $26 million match. Of course, we see our local sources in the general fund. Those are basically our local tax dollars. Over in the special revenue fund, we see $220 million in federal dollars. Most of those dollars are the CARES monies, the monies that we receive because of the COVID activity. So, of course, we are projecting about $220 million in those funding for fiscal year 2022. We also see Debt Service Fund, of course, as we stated, the payment of long-term debt, Capital Projects Fund, the building of schools, building renovations of schools, Fiduciary Fund, or Expendable Trust Fund, non-public school activities, FBLA Club or the Social Science Club or club type monies. But we see our total projected revenues at about $519 million. I do want to point out that in our special revenue fund, we see that at about $230 million in a normal year, or in most years, the amount is usually around $45 to $50 million. The reason that is so high, again, is because of the CARES money, those stimulus monies that we obtain from the federal government. So this is something that will run out, and so we tell all of our staff, let's not get too dependent on these particular funds, because they will go away. And there again, we see our total budget of $519 million. First, I'd like to talk about the general fund. of the $250 million, which is the majority of our fund sources for fiscal year 2022. And we see in our general fund, the majority of the dollars are coming from the state. The state does fund, is our largest funding source for a lot of school districts. Now you have some school districts that are outliers where they may have a little bit more local monies, but most school districts, state funding makes up the majority of the funds. This is, of course, again, is where the state foundation program monies are coming from. Also in the general fund, you get a little bit of federal funds. These are mostly ROTC dollars. We have a ROTC program that we operate at about 4 or 5 of our schools. And so the federal government provides us a little monies to go towards the salaries and benefits of the ROTC staff. Then, of course, local funds, the majority of those dollars are, again, our local tax revenues. Our property taxes, all of us have to pay property taxes, of course, at the end of the year. Everybody that owns a house have to pay property taxes. Sales taxes, we also get a little bit of sales tax from our county commission. So all of that is part of our local revenues. Other revenue and fund sources, the majority of this is called indirect cost. Now these funds, indirect cost, is a small assessment fee that our general fund assess to our federal dollars in order to administer those programs. So again, so let's say that we're getting $200 million in federal dollars. Well, the state allows us to assess a little small administrative fee in order for the employees to administer those particular programs. Okay, and here we see a breakdown of our total general fund revenues. We notice that the majority of our revenues is about 70% is coming from the state. Local revenues about 23.4%. And what I've said to the board and said to many other people is that this shows that we are too dependent on state revenues. You don't want to have to be that dependent on state revenues. That's why it was so important that we petitioned the good people of Montgomery to increase property taxes. Mainly because when situations happen with state, such as proration, something that happened several years ago, many school districts almost went belly up because they did not have those local tax revenues to help support the school, or they had to lay off drastically in order to meet the school's needs. Okay, this is just a very similar comparison that shows what our local revenues are compared to some other school districts that have similar demographics as Montgomery. Again, you see that our local revenues are at about 23.4%, but we see Birmingham local revenues at about 45%, almost double that of Montgomery. We also see Huntsville City Schools at about 45%. Almost double that of Montgomery. So we see that it is really, really important that we not be so dependent on state revenues because it could cause a huge amount of problems. Now, when the property tax is passed and when we start receiving those revenues, then we also I have a slide to show exactly where we'll be after we receive those ad valorem taxes. And you still see that we're still a little bit behind those other districts. However, I have to say that it would be a big help. The property tax that was approved by the people of Montgomery, or the good people of Montgomery, will add about $33 million a year to our coffers. And that would help out a lot, but you still see that our local revenues will make up about 32% of our total revenues. And again, we compare that to Birmingham and to Huntsville at about 45%. So we still see that we have a ways to go to be just as competitive as other school districts who have similar demographics as Montgomery. And of course, as I stated before, there should be deliverables. We have to deliver for the good people of Montgomery. The state funding process, as I stated, is based on student population. Montgomery has about 3%, 3.8% of the total student population. receive about 3.8% of the total funding. So what the state does, it looks at the number of children, the number of students we have at each school, and they look at those number of students based on grade level. For example, let's just say that you have an elementary school, grades K through 3, and you have 500 students. And let's say they're in grades K through 3 or kindergarten through 3rd grade. Let's say you have 200 students. In all, in that school, you have 200 students that makes up grades kindergarten through 3. And let's say the teacher say, the state says, I'm gonna fund you for one teacher for every 20 students you have in grades K through 3. So if we divide 200 into 20, we get 10. That means the state will fund us for 10 teacher units for grades K through 3. And that's how the state, it looks at all of those various grade levels, determine the number of students in all those grade levels. Then you have those certain divisors. Now, you have divisors in various grade levels. Grades K through 3 may be every 20 students you earn one teacher unit. Grades 4 through 6, it could be 18 students you earn one teacher unit. But then as you go up some, then usually it increases. For example, then probably in grades 7 through 8, maybe probably every 22, 25 students, you may earn one teacher unit. Then grades 9 through 12, every X number of students, you earn one teacher unit. And the state provides us the funding based on the number of teacher units we earn for each of those grade levels. We see that districts that provide more local support per child has the following advantages. Of course, increased seasonal cash flow, mainly the decreasing of class sizes. And that's something that we're huge on. We want to decrease class sizes. And we want to provide more educational opportunities for our students. We want to expose our students to many more opportunities. You have various career tech programs that we want to expose our students to. You have various foreign language courses we want to expose our students to. You have various high-level English and math courses we want to expose our students to. But you have to have that local revenue in order to do that. Now let's look at our student average daily membership for fiscal year 2022, in which what the amount we're going to be funded on compared to last year. You see, we lost about 650 students. Well, anytime you lose students, you lose money. Money is tied to the student population. Now we see that we lost a total of about 43.08 units for fiscal year 2022. Well, that's a loss of, let's just say that the state uses, let's say $80,000 per unit. So if you multiply $80,000 times 43 units, then you see over $3 million that you're losing because of that loss of teacher units based on the loss of student population. I'm gonna get good at this at some point. Okay, now, as I stated, we're required to do what is called fund match in order to participate in the state's largest funding program, which is the foundation program. And let's look at the fund match along with what the state is providing us out of the state's foundation program. We see foundation program, state and local funds. So this number includes that total number where it says total foundation program, 177 million. That is the total amount of monies that the state is providing us, along with the amount of local match that we have to put up. So it includes the $26 million almost that we have to put up, along with the foundation dollars that the state would give us for fiscal year 2022. And of course, we see the amount. Now, one may ask, when you look at salaries, it shows that it's an increase of about $1 million in revenues. So one may ask, if you lost students, then why are you seeing an increase in the amount of money from last year to the prior year? Well, that is because the state is also funding that 2% raise. That is why we see a little bit more increase for fiscal year 2022. That is because of the 2% raise. However, we did lose money for 2022 because of our drop in student population. Okay, the actual amount that the state is going to remit to Montgomery Public Schools will be $151 million. You see foundation program, ETF, $151,548,000. If you were to take that $151,548,000 and add the local match to that, which is the almost $26 million, you'll get that $177 million. So the state's saying, okay, yeah, Montgomery, you're going to have to pay for teacher salaries and benefits of $177 million, along with a few of those other line items. However, we're going to only remit to you $151 million. So the other $26 million, you are going to have to come up with yourself to fund match in order to pay those particular employees. And of course, again, we see that's an increase of about $4.3 million to last year. Again, that is because of the 2% raise. We see a little bit of increase for nurse programs. They did increase the nurse program amount a little bit this year. Of course, some of that is the 2% raise as well. Transportation operation, we see a loss in that. That is to transport our students to and from school. We see fleet renewal, where we lost about $252,000 in fleet renewal funds. Fleet renewal funds are dollars that we use to purchase school buses. However, there's a catch to that. Any bus that is 10 years old or older, you do not get fleet renewal funds from the state. So any bus that is older than 10 years, any bus that is older than 10 years, we do not receive fleet renewal dollars for those particular buses. So the state is only going to give us $7,581 per bus for buses that are 10 years old or less. And again, we see the state capital purchase dollars of about $8 million almost, but let's remember on those state capital purchase dollars that we'll be required to put up about $1.1 million to participate in the state capital purchase program. And again, those are our fund matches. Again, we see almost $26 million to participate in the foundation program, about $1.1 million to participate in the state capital purchase program. And again, these are dollars that the district has to put up out of its own local revenues. Let's look at a breakdown of the other revenues that we received. Of course, we said the federal revenues out of our general fund, we said the majority of that was ROTC dollars. Of course, as we stated, we have ROTC programs in about 4 or 5 of our high schools. And of course, we see the breakdown of our local revenues, which are our property taxes, sales taxes, gasoline taxes. Those are our local revenues. And then we see other revenue and other fund sources of about $17.4 million. And as we stated, the majority of that is indirect costs, which is the small administrative fee that a school district's general fund assess to the federal programs in order to operate those particular programs. Also, let me go back one. Oh, that's it. Okay, all school districts operate also on about 8 functional areas of expense. First, there's the instructional expenditures. Instructional expenditures speaks to all expenditures dealing with the interaction of teacher to student. So any expenditure related to the interaction of teacher to student. So all of our teacher salaries and benefits will be deemed instructional expenditures. All of the paper and all of the other supplies that our teachers use, teacher workbooks, textbooks, all of those things that our teachers use to work with our students will be termed instructional expenditures. Instructional support expenditures or expenditures concerned with the supervision of the instructional process. These are basically those individuals that support the teachers so that the teachers can provide instruction to the students. The principals, they support the teachers so that the teachers can provide instruction to the students. Assistant principals, That would be instructional support expenditures. Librarians, that's instructional support. Counselors, those would be instructional supports. So the majority of that also would be the salaries and benefits of our principals, counselors, librarians, and all of those individuals that help support the teacher so that that teacher could provide instruction to our students. Operation and maintenance or activities or expenditures concerned with keeping our buildings both clean, safe, and secure. So keeping our buildings both clean, safe, and secure. This would be all of our custodial staff will make up operational expenditures. We have security guards here right now to keep the building secure. All of our security staff will be part of operational expenditures. All of our logistics staff, the maintenance staff, would be part of our operation expenditures. All of our utilities. As you know, we have the air running right now. We want to keep the building both comfortable and safe. So all of our utilities would be part of our operation expenditures. Auxiliary services are those expenditures of a subsidiary capacity level. This is mainly transportation expenditures. It's transportation expenditures in our general fund, and they are child nutrition or food service expenditures in our special revenue fund. So auxiliary services make up of two types of expenditures. Again, it's transportation expenditures in the general fund, and it is food service expenditures or child nutrition expenditures in our special revenue fund. General administrative services, of course, we know what that is: the superintendent's office, the finance office, human resource office, and all of those offices that help and the school board are all part of general administrative, help set policies and so forth for the school district. Capital outlay, of course, we stated that is part of the building and construction of our schools. The renovating of our schools would be deemed capital outlay. Then, of course, debt service expenditures, the payment of long-term debt. As I stated earlier, we do have a few bond issues in which we pay both principal and interest. And of course, after we start our building program a year or so from now, we'll have a lot more debt service expenditures because we'll do what is called letting bonds. We'll let some bonds, and of course, we'll have to pay both principal and interest on those bonds in order to build and to renovate schools. Other expenditures are activities or programs that are not normally considered day school. It's kind of interesting, but pre-K is considered other expenditures. Extended day or tutoring will be termed or deemed other expenditures. These are expenditures that are not part of the K-12 regular day running of a school. Again, pre-K, as I said K-12, not pre-K-12, so K-12. So pre-K is other expenditures, tutoring and after-school type activities, all of those will be deemed other expenditures. And of course, there we see a breakdown of our total expenditures for the general fund for fiscal year 2022. We see over almost $183 million of those total expenditures is going towards the classroom or to help support the classroom. And that's exactly where we want the monies to go. We want to see the grand majority of our funds going to the classroom or going to help support the classroom. And then, of course, we see operation and maintenance and those other various levels of expenditures. Operation and maintenance, of course, keeping our buildings safe and clean and secure. Auxiliary, that'll be transportation because we're talking about the general fund right now. General administrative, the superintendent's office, finance office, and so forth. Other expenditures, of course, pre-K, tutoring, and of course, other fund uses. Let me just speak on other fund uses. The $2.5 million is something that we call transfer out. Our general fund is required to pay the benefits, the salary benefits of our child nutrition staff. Now, our child nutrition staff, they're in the special revenue fund, but our state law, we're one of only 1 or 2 or 3 states, I think even in the nation, that we're where the general fund is required to pay the benefits of the child nutrition staff. And that's what that $2.5 million represents. And there we see a pie chart of our total general fund expenditures. And again, we see almost 80% of our total expenditures goes to support the classroom. And again, that's exactly where we want those funds to go. This is pretty much in line with other large school districts. Anywhere between 75 to 81% of expenditures going towards support of the classroom. We thought we'd do a recap of our prior year fund balance. We began fiscal year 2021 with about a $34.4 million fund balance. Now let's keep in mind that the state requires us to have about 18-point-something million dollars in order to have a 1-month fund balance. That's what the state law says. It says that all school districts must have in its general fund at least a 1-month fund balance, which for Montgomery Public Schools for fiscal year 2021 was 18-point-something million dollars. I think we have it on the screen, $18.4 million almost was what was required. We are projecting by the end of this year that we'll see an increase in our fund balance of about $16 to $17 million. And so we're projecting to end fiscal year 2021 with about $51.3 million. That's almost 3 times what the state requires. So I think the superintendent and this board has done an excellent job in streamlining expenditure, because I would tell you that about 2 or 3 years ago, when we first got here, we were looking at a negative fund balance. And of course, that caused a lot of things with the state. Of course, as we know, the state intervened in our school district and so forth. But because the superintendent and the board has done such a great job, both instructionally and financially, of course, the state is of course, relinquishing that control effective December 1st, because we met every guideline that the state had placed on us. And so you see that we're projected to end with about $51.3 million. And we changed, I think we had 19 point something on the last one, which was incorrect. So we put in, should have been 18.3. And of course, for fiscal year 2022, our projections is that we'll have total revenues of about $250 million, total expenditures of about $234 million. And we're projecting to have an increase of revenues over expenditures. Of course, in private industry, they call that a net profit, but we don't call that a net profit in school systems, in a governmental agency. We're seeing about $16.6 million. Again, we project to end fiscal year 2021, which would be the beginning fund balance of 2022, at about $51.3 million. So we're projecting to end the year 2022 at about $68 million. Again, we're projected to end fiscal year 22 with about $68 million. Actually, it may be a little less than that, because some of these revenues will be deferred into future years, but that's okay. Our 1-month fund balance requirement for fiscal year 2022 will be about $19.4 million. Now, the way they determine that 1-month fund balance, they take the total expenditures and divide it by 12. So if we take that total expenditure of $233 million, $233.779 million, and divide it by 12, we should come up with about $19,481,000. And that's how they determine the 1-month fund balance requirement for all school districts. Next, I'll just speak briefly about the special revenue funds. Again, this is the majority of our federal dollars. The majority of those dollars this year, of course, or because of the COVID situation. We received quite a bit of dollars from the state. Now, these dollars are earmarked, so we just can't spend it any way we want to. These dollars are to provide instruction, mainly instruction, and to provide a safe environment for our schools. So that's what we're trying to do with those dollars. Again, we see about $230 million, $220 million, of course, from the federal government. Local, about $6.8 million. That local monies in the special revenue are mainly those local school dollars that I was speaking about, local school public dollars. These are monies that are collected for all of our students. Along with, although we provide what is called a CEP as it relates to our lunch program, where all of our students eat without having to pay any money. Of course, we do provide certain other things on the menu where students can pay. So that local money would include those particular funds along with our local school funds. And there we see a pie chart of our total special revenue funds. And of course, we see the $220 million. It's about 96% of those funds. Again, I just want to reiterate that those dollars will go away. Those dollars will go away. So we do not want to be too dependent on these particular dollars. So you have to be extremely careful about hiring a lot of staff, a permanent type staff with these particular dollars, because then you ask the question, or you have to ask the question, when the dollars go away, then what do you do? So we want to be extremely careful with that. Now, some things we have to do and we need to do, but we want to be extremely careful with the type of expenditures we accumulate out of those particular COVID type dollars. And there we just see a comparison of last year's federal dollars comparable to this year, of what our projections are for 2022. Again, we see the breakdown of those funds. We see the $6.8 million of local revenues, as I stated, was mainly the food service, the little things that we do have on the menu where kids can pay. Also, those local school revenues, monies that are raised at the school level. And we also see that $2.5 million pass-through that I was speaking of in the general fund. These are monies that our general fund passed through to the special revenue fund to pay those salary benefits of the child nutrition staff. And there we see a breakdown of our total expenditures for special revenue. We see quite a bit in operation and maintenance because what we want to do, we want to make sure that we are putting enough money in PPE supplies and those kinds of things to ensure that our schools are safe. We also see some monies also in capital outlay in special revenue. A lot of these things are very, very odd. You don't see that all the time. But a lot of this is coming from those COVID dollars. The federal government is also allowing us to do some things with HVAC for clean air. And so we did, looking at about $19 million in capital outlay for clean air. The government also stated to all school districts that you must set aside X percentage of your total federal dollars and other expenditures to provide before and after school tutoring. And that's why you see that number so much higher than it was the previous year. There's something about catch up on the learning, and they're doing everything they can to encourage school districts to do what you can to kind of catch up, help the students kind of catch up during all the times that they lost instruction over the last year or so. And there we just see a pie chart, of course, of all the expenditures for our special revenue fund. Just a recap of our projected fund balance at the end of the year. We're looking at an excess over revenues of about $4.6 million. We believe we'll begin fiscal year 2022 with about $3.5 million in special revenue fund, and we'll end the year with about $8.1 million. Now, the majority of that excess of revenues over expenditures, or in private industry they term profit, will mainly be local school dollars and food service dollars. So that's what most of that increase would be. Then we'll talk about the debt service fund. The debt service fund is basically monies that we utilize to pay long-term debt. As I stated, we do have a couple of bond issues in which we are paying some long-term debt. We see about $5.2 million that we're paying or projected to pay for fiscal year 2022. Now, what we do, we transfer some funds from our capital projects fund to the debt service fund to pay that long-term debt. And the state allows you to do that because those capital projects dollars are for the building and renovation of schools. And when we let those bonds to build and to renovate schools. So they allow you to make those transfers. And that just shows that it was an internal transfer from the capital projects fund to the debt service fund. Then we have the capital the capital projects fund again speaks to our capital projects dollars. The state passed a bond issue, or our state legislature passed a bond issue last year in which Montgomery Public Schools received about $33 million in capital project funds. We're projecting to begin this year with about $27 million. Those $27 million of those particular dollars. So that's where that $32 million come from. Also, we are receiving some state capital purchase dollars also from the state in order to build and renovate schools. But we're projecting by the end of fiscal year 2022 that our beginning fund balance will be about $2 million in our capital projects fund. We'll spend $1 million more, and we're projected to end the year with about $1 million in our capital projects fund. Expendable trust fund, again, of course, are those funds that local schools generate, more club-type funds. The social science club or the SGA club or the FBLA club. They may have fundraisers, they may have fees or whatever to help support the students just in those particular club activities. So we're projecting that the schools, they'll raise over $800,000, and of course we got projected that they'll spend almost all of it, as they normally do, and to help support many of the activities that they have going on during the school year. And there again, we see our total operating budget for fiscal year 2022. Again, we are projecting in our general fund to begin the year with about $51.3 million. We believe we'll have an increase of about $16.6 million to end the year with about $68 million in general fund. Recap of special revenue, we believe we'll end the year with about $3.5 million. We'll have about a $4.6 million increase and end the year with about $8.1 million. Debt service, of course, the $23.9 million. Matters that we have to pay long-term bond debt. We have to pay those bond holders at some point. Capital projects fund, we have $1 million that we are projected to end with at the end of the year. And of course, we see our expendable trust fund amounts. Madam President, I know that was kind of fast, but I can entertain questions if.
Ms. Smith?
I will be equally as fast. I had a quick question as you were going through the budget, and I looked at the supplemental information for the schools. I wanted to know if schools receive ESSA funds as well, in addition to what they get from the state for Title I and foundation and whatnot?
Well, the superintendent and of course administration, they sit down with principals to determine what the needs of those schools are, and they help support all of the schools. Now, we did allocate some funds for all the local schools this current year, and I forgot the amount we did per student. Mr. Bishop, you remember the amount per student? We did, for every school, we did provide a certain amount per student so those schools could provide some instructional supplies so parents would not have to kind of relieve parents of hardship of having to purchase instructional supplies for those students.
Right. I heard them say $20 for that one, but I was wondering, the reason I ask is because I was wondering if their schools are in need of additional like tutoring services or bringing in organizations to work with, to do social and emotional well-being training and whatnot, if they were given those funds to provide that. And that's why I asked for that one.
I will just say that we do have budgeted in our fiscal year 2022 budget, and some even in 2021, monies for, of course, social emotional students or any type of situation that they may have. Dr. Williams she communicates with principals to contact her so that we can meet those particular needs.
Okay, and then my other question was about the flexibility with ESSA. Do they allow school districts to kind of pivot if we need to, in case COVID just surges out of control and we may need something? We may have gone in with plan A and said, okay, we got to go to plan B. So does it allow some flexibility?
It does allow some flexibility. Sometimes you may have to amend the budget or do some amendments, but they do keep in mind that, for example, let's say that, of course, we have face-to-face school right now. If something went so drastically that we need to do just a total virtual learning, then we have to shift and do that right then, and along with some other things that they will allow you to do in order to meet the instructional needs of students and to meet the safety and mental well-being of students.
Okay, and I think the other one, we may have answered it, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Because we have the Literacy Act and of course we are faced with learning loss, I was just wondering if there were any additional funds expanded to library enhancement. I know that, that's a component, that's reading. So I was wondering, I didn't see it and I may have overlooked it, but I wanted to know if there was some expansion in the budget for library enhancement.
There is, in fact, I spoke with, what's our library? Dr. Dr. Blakeney about that, and she is looking at working with the principal to kind of help equip the libraries and help to provide books and so forth for our students.
Okay, and the other part was, I know that we know where to look for the ESSA report for the state, but the community does not know. And I just wanted to ask or make a suggestion if we could, just for transparency's sake, put out a breakdown where parents or the community can go easily assess it, because there's a lot of questions like, what are you doing with the money? So I think if it was just easy to kind of get to and they could see, because we know, but they just don't know.
Okay.
And my last question.
And Jade is here, so she's hearing that question, hearing that comment also. So.
I didn't see her down there. The last question is dealing with our at-risk funds, and it's still going to go back to social and emotional well-being, but we get at-risk fund, but is there a way to use ESSA funds to also expand that program?
Yes, ma'am. It also can help supplement the at-risk program. And again, Dr. Williamson, she works with our at-risk program. In fact, she's also requested certain things to be put in the budget, in this ESSA budget, to help support those particular students.
Okay, and Dr. Williams, I will send you some questions that I had about that. I won't take up time to talk about it here.
Do we have another question?
The state, the government is allowing ESSA funds now to be used towards dual enrollment. So that is also in the budget.
All right, and correct me if I'm wrong, on our strategic plan, because I was looking for it today, what is the percentage that we were trying to increase dual enrollment? Was it 3 or was it 30? Do you remember? Anybody remember?
I have to ask the superintendent or the academic officer for that. She was asking about the increase of dual enrollment. What were we asking? What were we trying to increase by for dual enrollment?
I'll have to reply back. I know the number, but it's the exact number.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell will report back to you about that particular increase. But there is a goal that we want to increase our dual enrollment by.
Because the reason I'm asking is last night the Junior League had pretty much a conference for a college fair. And I had stopped, I don't know how many MPS students, and they were very interested.
That's
and some of
good.
the information that I was finding out, I'm gonna talk with the superintendent about later. So it gave me some concern.
Okay, that is great that we have students that are interested in
Yes.
that, and maybe we put the word out even more. So I think that's awesome. Okay, sure.
Okay. Well, my question has to do with preschool. I noticed it was lined out, zero balance for preschool, so we don't have any funding going towards preschool. And also the school improvement grant, we don't receive any money for that anymore.
In fact, we have a lot of money going towards preschool. Dr. Short, how many preschool classrooms do we have now? We have 30 preschool classrooms now, and so we have millions of dollars going towards preschool. And the state is continuing to support that. In fact, I was just reading a few minutes ago before coming down here that for the 2023 budget, they're requesting almost doubling the amount for preschool for 2023. But the district also, not only is the district using monies we receive from the state for preschool, but we also supplement whenever that need arises.
I just wondered, on page 43, it had zeros, I didn't know.
Oh, that was it, probably just a comparison. I would need to see what you,
Page 43, it had 0 for 2021 and 2022.
oh, it would be in another line item,
Which line item is it?
other expenditures.
Okay. My other
You
question.
remember me saying that other expenditures, that pre-K and tutoring are in the line item called other expenditures.
Okay. In the back where it lists the total teacher units and so forth, I guess I have a question. Based on technology and we going virtual / and face-to-face, a lot of schools do not have a tech coordinator. And is that item listed on the teacher? Was that not a separate item? Because I know a few years ago, we used to have tech coordinators, technology assistants, and so forth. So is there any way that can be worked back into the budget? Because it is a need
In fact,
with technology.
okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yes, we actually, that's kind of interesting because there'll be a proposal tonight on stipends for various teachers that are over various clubs and classes and other activities, and tech coordinator will be one of those recommendations. Yes, ma'am.
Are there other questions from the board or from the audience? Mr. Watts, this looks like a fine budget. Thank you so much for your hard work on it.
Thank you.
Next up, we have an update from Volkert.
Thank you.
Madam President, board members,
Superintendent Moore, thank you for allowing us to come back and update you on our progress so far on the capital improvement plan. There should be a PowerPoint. If we could get it started, please. Next slide, please. Again, I'm with Volkert and Associates. We've got team members from Kemp Management Solutions, KWZ Contracting, Pathway Research Studio are here with us tonight. Dr. Salmon is not here, but he's working in the background. Next slide. The past month, we've hit the ground running pretty hard, and the data has been collected for the birth data, the community growth trends, housing trends, business development trends, census, and the grade-to-grade survival ratios. We expect the analysis report to be coming from Dr. Simon this week. Next slide, please. Our initial facility assessments, we've done our field sites. Done our site visits to all the schools to make notes of the physical conditions, the design capacities, site constraints, and looked over the previous information from the previous studies. We will start conducting our interviews with the stakeholders and soon to provide our report of the findings. Next slide. Some of our next steps are to advertise and to conduct the public forum, to invite MBE, DBE professional service firms to participate in the design work. We'll be developing a list of potential design consultant firms and develop the criteria and formats for the design consultant's statement of qualifications. We'll also prepare an advertisement to generate interest and then assist in the evaluation of the qualifications and conducting the interviews, as well as make recommendations. Our short-term look ahead is to advertise to inform and invite the MBE, DBE professional service firms, conduct a forum to help introduce them to the building program and to help them be able to participate in the design work. Then we will advertise for professional services, evaluate those standard statements of qualifications. At the same time, we'll be developing and finishing up our report on the assessments and the demographic findings and make the recommendations of the capital improvements from those findings. We'll then be doing community meetings to inform the public and to request input from them. And our next step would be to finalize the plan and assign the professional services teams to start the design work. That, I believe, wraps it up. If we have any questions.
I have one question. Going back to your selection of design consultants, I was just making sure. Will there be like a timeline that you can provide the board so we can, and I know nothing's concrete, but just a general timeline of when the process, as you go throughout the process?
We're looking to do the MBE forum by the 5th of October. And that way we can generate a list of good qualified firms at that point, and we will advertise after that for the general design firms to be done by probably the first or second week of November.
Okay, but if you don't mind, if we can just get some just general timelines, dates, so that we can kind of keep up with it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis, Central Alabama Works.
Good afternoon, Dr. Moore, board members. I am going to let Jindy from Central Alabama Works explain the kind of the tasks that the legislature has given Alabama Works and each of its regional districts about the modern manufacturing program and why the legislators have asked us to do this. And then I'll come back in and talk about how Impact is going to put that in order.
Thank you, Todd. Thank y'all for letting me speak today. Try to be brief on this, but I'm Jindy Prutzman with Central Alabama Works. We are one of the 7 workforce regions across the state, and we work with business and industry to listen to their needs and then to help build out individuals with those skills that they need. So part of this discussion that we're talking about today, Modern Manufacturing Program, it comes from discussion with our OEMs, or our large automobile manufacturers. Of course, you know we have 4 in the state, and manufacturing is one of the top industries driving our state. These 4 have been in talks through the Alabama Association of Automobile Manufacturers, and of course have talked about the workforce needs, and out of this has come a program that was launched, kind of created in the west side of our state with Mercedes, and it's had really good, has been received really well, and is actually producing a pipeline that's going into the automobile manufacturing as well as just manufacturing in general. So the legislature has allocated $1 million to the 4 OEM regions. So within those regions, each region will pilot this program in 4 schools. So Impact was actually the first one that we've talked with, and that's what this is about. What it will do is put a program in place in the high schools, will be 4 in our region, that will train and teach skills in modern manufacturing. Not necessarily advanced manufacturing, but modern being what is needed right now, those applicable skills that for our students who want to graduate and go straight to work, they have the skills needed and can walk into that job. If they want to go a little further, 2-year, 4-year, even advanced certifications, they can do that as well. But this is really just an answer to the automotive manufacturing, and hopefully this will be done and be replicated. What the whole package is, I guess if you want a quick example of it, is that money will be, money is available for the instructor training, and all instructors will be sent to the Center of Excellence, which is in the West Alabama around the Mercedes plant. They will be training individuals who will teach these skills and then go back into the schools. The money has been provided for a substitute, for travel, for equipment in the classroom, and there will be a project manager that will be out of our office that will work as a liaison between the school and the business. And so therefore helping the school recruit students, get students in this program, and then helping business know that they can connect and hire from the program. So that's in a capsule. But I think what we're here today is to talk about the MOU, so I'll turn it back to Mr. Davis.
Are there any questions from here?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. The only question that I have is there not a relationship with Hyundai? They are right here in the area, and I think I heard you say that the training would be conducted at the Mercedes plant?
That's a great question. Yes, Hyundai is who will be driving this. Hyundai and their suppliers. The only reason it's being done at Mercedes plant is because they've piloted this and they've worked with a school that's close by, and so they have kind of that synergy going with the school, and so they want to bring instructors into it and see how they've worked that with both the plant situation and instructors, so that they'll know the things, to teach. And no, Hyundai is very much on board, along with Mobis, and we've talked to several others. So yes, they're very much on board and are tweaking this whole curriculum so to speak, to be, to their needs. Yes, ma'am, thank you.
So our agreement, I'm sorry, you want? Go ahead. So the agreement between Montgomery Public Schools and Central Alabama Works just states that we will provide the teacher, and we already have that instructor. We already have that instructor under the manufacturing pathway at MPAT now. So what we'll do is students will continue to be in that industrial maintenance program, but they'll have two pathways. They'll have the traditional industrial maintenance, but they could also choose the modern manufacturing pathway when they come into the program. The agreement specifically says what Central Alabama Works will provide, what we will provide, and it's been approved by Dr. Moore and Jeandy from Central Alabama Works.
One of the things I did not notice on the contract was the cost. I was just curious as to what the cost was.
The cost to us is nothing. We already have that instructor. The cost for the program and the equipment is being undertaken by Central Alabama Works.
Okay, and my other question, and it's good to know that something's coming into impact, and I heard you say traditional, modern. I hope we do venture over into the advanced technology because technology is changing rapidly, so we got to be able to change with it. But I wanted to know if we could get a kind of like a semi-annual or quarterly update to know how many students are participating in it, how many students are being credentialed in it, so we can see, just how successful this program is working
And
for
the
our
program
students.
or at the impact in general?
The impact.
Yes, ma'am. I can do a quarterly update.
Okay.
Sure.
And just so you'll know too, the state will require us, since this has been an allocation to the Education Trust Fund, the state will require us, and as Central Alabama Works, we will have a set of metrics that we are working off of that we will show, the response this year, both students enrolled, hiring coming out of it. I imagine there will be a number of them. They're being developed right now, but it will be the same set for all 4 regions.
Okay, other questions? Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
yes, just one. Referring to cost, I do notice that most of our participation will be in-kind provisions, but we are responsible for covering the cost for the lease of the VR headsets after the first year. And I do see where, is it RWC, will try to help raise those funds, but
And we will take care of that out of our Perkins Fund, out of our Career Tech funds. So that will not be any cost at the general fund from the board.
thank you.
Okay, sounds very promising. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, Imagine Learning contract. And several others, so I'm going to let you have the floor for a while.
Great evening, Board Chair, Assistant Chair, Board members, Dr. Moore. The first item, we want to present receive as information for the approval of Imagine Learning for 3 years in the amount of $369,000. The fund source is ESSA. Are there any questions there? I did bring some colleagues that can speak more to it if I needed them. They on deck, they're ready.
I would like to hear from Ms. Sir, I hope I'm Essery, am I saying it right? Ms. Lizette. If you would just give us a little introduction to it. I read and did some research on it, found it to be a really wonderful program from what I researched, but I'd like to just hear how it's going to help our ELL students.
Yes, ma'am. Well, as we know, with COVID, we've had quite a lot of learning loss with the Alabama Literacy Act coming into place. A lot of our third graders, EL students, are right now at a first grade level. Imagine Learning is a program that takes all of the fundamentals of good reading instruction. It's computer-based, and it's meant to target the needs of the EL students. It starts somewhere they are, and it builds as they get a little better in reading. I don't know how else to say it. It creates a learning path for them. It explicitly teaches in spirals their academic and domain-specific vocabulary throughout the program, provides multiple interactions. It gives them the ability to also speak and record themselves. It has explicit phonics instruction, vocabulary instruction, fluency instruction, which we all know is important in reading, and it teaches comprehension strategies and a lot of other aspects that they're weak on in reading. The issue and the reason it's so important is we know our teachers have a limited time trying to catch all of our students up with their learning loss. All our reading teachers are already working with students that are far behind. They're trying to bring them up to speed. They have small groups, they have intervention, they have the double dose, and with the Imagine Learning, what we're gonna do is that is gonna be a mandated center, 3 days a week for 30 minutes a day for the EL students, but also with them having one-to-one devices, it is also something that they can use at home. I have already purchased all of the headsets that will be needed for the students to use those one-on-one devices as well as for our testing program. Any other questions? Okay.
I love what you do, Lizette, by the way, and I like how you inform us, so you need other teachers and stuff, but I
Thank
want
you.
the board, I don't know if y'all saw the news last night, but the news was alarming to me. It had Dr. Mackey on there that said, you know, that our 8th graders across the state took the standardized test and 40% were proficient. That means 60% are not. That was 2018-19. Since COVID, and I know we're in it with everybody, every other state, but they've done another test, standardized test, on 8th graders, and we are down to 14%. That means 86% of our students are not proficient. And what I'm saying, in math, this was in math, but I can imagine English. We've got to have programs, Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, that help us, get these kids back up to where they should be, because that is huge to me. So I don't know if y'all heard it, but it shocked me.
And I will say right now, we have approximately 3,100 ELs in the district. 300 of those are students that are under monitoring. Our EL1 population has blown up considerably. We're at, I want to say about 900 first year in our schools. And some of them, unfortunately, came in last year in the middle of the pandemic. So they did their whole schooling virtually and had never set foot in a classroom. Then we have about another 2,100 second year or above. So, with that being said, and granted, Dr. Moore and Ms. Gillis have worked very hard giving me the staff I need. I do have a lot more staff this year. We are going to be able to provide more services, but it's still not going to be enough to make up for the learning loss that these kids experienced during the pandemic and that they continue to experience even now.
And I appreciate you giving the update, because you ask, it says that, you're out there, you ask for the additional help, and you got it. So I feel good that Dr. Moore did that. I also, on that news last night, one of the good things was the summer enrichment program. It said we had record numbers, 12,000. And I hope that we will continue to do that, because we're going to need it.
And I do want to give Dr. Moore kudos, because she has always supported me in anything I've asked for. She's tried to make it happen. So thank you, Dr. Moore. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You said that third graders, we had many third graders who were still on first grade
Yes, ma'am.
level. How many third graders do you have in the system, and then what is the percentage of those?
Now, I can't give you a percentage of all third graders. I don't know if Mr. Mitchell has that. I know out of my EL students that are in third grade, well, let me go back and say something first. First of all, a lot of our students that come in do not speak any English when they get here. It takes 7 to 10 years for an EL student to become proficient in the English language. So I know myself and a lot of my colleagues across the state are having a very big issue with the Literacy Act, because with that being said, we know children that come in kindergarten are not going to be proficient probably until the 7th to 9th grade. So they're going to be at a disadvantage there. And then when you put in the fact of the pandemic, but I could tell you that probably, rough estimate, I would say probably about 60% of my ELs in the third grade are probably at a first grade level.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, the information with assessment is embargoed, but we're excited to share it probably at this time next month after it's no longer embargoed, and we're going to show by grade, by content, and by demographics exactly the performance of our students. And as Dr. Keith shared, it's a great discrepancy between the ELA results and the math results. But since it's embargoed, we will be able to share it after September the 27th to speak more to it. The state fortunately gave us funding to support this, so one of the things that we have here with the Imagine Learn is around language and literacy. So that was that document. The second request for information presented is on Renaissance Learning Incorporated. 1 year in amount of $783,173.59. Only quotes 1 and 2 should remain on the consideration for the board approval. We need you to delete quotes 3 through 6. We're only doing year 1 quotes. So it's only quotes 1 and 2. And the fund source is ESSER. Are there any questions with Renaissance?
I have one, Mr. Mitchell. Renaissance has been with this district for as long as I can remember. And I wanted to know, would this also be something mandated for teachers to use? I know it's a resource to them, but is it something that maybe should be mandated? I'm asking because I don't think a lot of teachers utilize it, or a lot of schools are pushing it as a tool to be used. I think it can be helpful.
There's some, and we can share it in its entirety. Every program that we're pushing tonight, as well as the one we have already, we want to mandate a certain time on task to support it. We know that if there's not a return on investment and an evaluation of where we are, we will not embark upon it with all schools. So we want to make sure that we can share and see the consideration of all programming utilized to fidelity. And we're saying that we don't want to bring anything before the board that will not be utilized to fidelity. And if it's not, we want to have conversations at their school or with their teacher.
My other question is, in the past, teachers had to look for supplementary material to kind of go with it. Will this, I don't know if it's been updated and changed or not, it's been a while since I've had to use it, but will there be resources that teachers can use that are already embedded in the program?
Yes, ma'am, and it's fully engaged and embedded in there. It's all in composing, so I'm looking forward to when it's approved. It's a couple more items that we're seeking approval that's addition to what we had in the past. So we're looking forward to the training and support that Renaissance will provide, as well as Dr. Sharkins and Dr. Dana Gant-Williams in elementary.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, Mr. Mitchell?
And I want to share one more thing there, that it is not just K-5, we're going from K-8 with Renaissance. The next receive as information for the approval of Common Lit. It involves assessment, PD, priority support in the amount of $102,000. The fund source is ESSER. Are there any questions there?
It's the teacher in me, I'm sorry. I would like for Dr. Johnson to just kind of give us a brief overview of the program and how it will benefit our students.
Good evening. So Common Lit is like a library of resources. It has various genres in it. With the shift in ELA, there are three key things that we need to address, one of them being complex text. And we know that our students often struggle with complex text. With Common Lit, unlike our core program, students are able to work on their grade level. So they could all be studying the same standards, but reading a text that they can actually penetrate and they can actually learn from. So it's more like a supplemental resource to our core program. It's a Tier 2 resource. And like Mr. Mitchell said, it has Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 components. It has a pre-test at the beginning, and so the children will test. All the ELA students have tested or will test within the next couple of weeks, and we will gain information to be able to see which standards they're not mastering, and they'll be able to continue learning through that program.
Embedded in this program also will be resources for the teachers to use. Will it, and I'm thinking about special needs kids when I ask this question, will it be able to, after it assesses them, adapt whatever to their learning style?
Yes, ma'am. It is adaptive, and they have different lessons based on grade level. So as Lizette was stating, if you have a third grade student or I'll say a fifth grade student, because Common Lit is 3 through 12. So if you have, and sometimes we have high school students who read on elementary levels. So if that's the case, and we have a ninth grader that's reading on a fifth grade level, we'll be able to accommodate for that child without them having to go and use a baby book, if you will. They could still be working on the standards where they are in intervention, and there will be an expectation that this will be used for our students.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Next, we want to receive as information for the approval of the Foundation for the Art and Science of Learning in the amount of $792,000. It's about teaching, improving practice. The fund source is ESSA as well. Are there any questions?
I do. This one I wasn't familiar with it. I did try to go look up some information, so if you could just give me a brief overview of what is this and how will it benefit our kids?
Here's the thing, that many times we were looking at programs. This is not a program. This is an art and science of learning practice. We need to improve our practice. So this is coaching, modeling, support to help improve the way we daily engage with our children. So we will have a team of educators to work in concert with our specialists to help and evaluate the learning through the teaching and science that exists with our practices. So this is ongoing, job-embedded coaching, modeling support with a company that's geared towards coaching and modeling support. This is 1 year. We're under consideration for a continuation, but we only did it for 1 year, and we're going to evaluate to see whether or not we should continue or not.
Other questions? Mr. Mitchell?
Next, we want to receive as information for the approval of MemBean in the amount of $97,000. The fund source also is ESSA. Are there any questions?
I have one. Oh, goodness, I guess
I'm bringing back Dr. Johnson for her wisdom and insight. Yeah.
The MemBean, if I'm Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry, I did have a question. MemBean, this is, I read that it's vocabulary, to help with vocabulary development. Oh, you're going to let Dr. Johnson, okay.
So, you know, our students, the reason that many of them do not do well on standardized tests is because they struggle with reading comprehension and they struggle with writing. Most of that is because of the lack of the appropriate complex vocabulary. So MemBean is a program that is the most differentiated program I've ever seen. It starts children off with a test, and it gauges how many words they know. And then it puts them on a pathway to learn more words. LAMP has used MemBean for the past 3 or 4 years, and even before they used it, they were pushing vocabulary instruction, which is something that we've been doing on the secondary level. However, it's difficult for a teacher in secondary who has 150 to 175 students to differentiate for all of those kids. So MemBean is the vocabulary program that will differentiate, and it will build vocabulary, and if used to fidelity, students will begin to read better, they'll begin to write better, and speak better. So I think that this program, if used the way it should be, we'll see some significant gains in our reading.
Okay. And one more, Mr. Mitchell.
And we want to present receive as information for the approval of MTSS, our district MOU amendment, coaches' salaries. The funding source is through a grant, so Montgomery Public Schools is not, paying the expenditures associated with it in $144,629.32. We believe that coaches and modeling will greatly aid us getting where we need to be with literacy and reading. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
I do want to share that we had to spend so much money around literacy and mathematics, so that's why you have so many opportunities tonight being brought to you. Thanks.
Madam Chair, I don't have a question, but I did want to say initially I was overwhelmed when I got all of these items that we'd be covering tonight and the amount of money that was involved. And when I reflected and I saw that not only do we have wonderful professional development, support for teaching and learning, resources, the overabundance of these funds are coming from ESSER. And this federal support is just going to make things so much better. So thank you for doing your due diligence, your research, and bringing these programs to us for our kids and for our teachers. Thank you.
Oh, I've got a question. I think all these programs are awesome. The money we spend is fine as long as we're using it. How do we know that each teacher is using it? Is there anything that we can see accountability that, one, the teacher's being trained to implement, and are they implementing?
And that's why I wanted even the specialists to come tonight, because any program they bring in forward, they also have the responsibility of being a facilitator to ensure high quality implementation, not just implementation, but high quality. And so with Performance Matters, who knew it that you approved maybe 2 months ago, we'll be able to see return on investment to see exactly the implementation rate with all of our programs. And we're going to bring that type of data back to board meeting so you can see exactly where we are. And if it's not there, with a conversation around coaching and modeling, that we can support teachers. And again, we know programs alone will not get results. So we want to be a part of a high quality integration with what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I believe Mr. Watts proposed academic and other school support salary supplements.
Thank you, Madam President. I may need Mr. Mitchell up here with me. Mr. Mitchell got together with a number of principals on the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level, and we talked about the type of incentives or the type of clubs and so forth that our students would be interested in. And so Mr. Mitchell got a lot of input from those principals. Mr. Mitchell, you may want to speak to that. And we also looked at some of the salary supplement schedules of other school districts to see what they were offering. And he presented some of those also to those principals. And then we came up with this recommendation.
I want to add one thing. I know many times we've asked our teachers and our principals and assistant principals to do a lot of things without being compensated. We have the opportunity to incentivize them in a way like we've never done before. So these supplements will just help aid and encourage them to participate as they always done, but now we'll be able to give them support as it relates to a supplement.
And most importantly, it's exposing our students to more opportunities, which is something we definitely want to see. We want to see our students participating in things after school that they may be interested in. And I think these exposure would be great for our kids. And
one thing in particular we have on there is chess. I just believe that if we can learn to think 3 steps ahead. You know, like chess, you know, requires, it'll give an opportunity to perform better, not just on an assessment, but in life. And I think that's important. In most of the programs we have, our principals said they were doing it anyway, they just was not having the ability to compensate their personnel for it.
I want to say one thing, and that is that this is monumental in my mind to encouraging our students to not just do these activities, but it helps them in math and reading and everything else in their school life. And I think it's terrific. Did anybody else have a question or a comment? Okay. Mr. Watts, I think you're still up.
Madam President, you all should have should have received the salary schedule. The only thing different in the salary schedule for this year is that the state approved a 2% increase for all employees. Also, the district approved an increase for additional increase for transportation employees and certain classified employees. As you know, transportation employees received an additional 13.55% for a total of 15.5%. And other classified employees received an additional 8% to 10%. And so the salary schedule includes all employees who receive the 2% plus the additional amount for those transportation employees and the other classified employees.
Did anyone have a question on the salary schedule? Okay. And I see you're getting a little help with Ms. Watkins on the financial tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Moore, board members. You should have before you the financial statement for the month of July. In that financial package, there is an explanation of the financial data provided by our CSFO, Mr. Watts, snapshot analysis, monthly budget percentages, monthly and annual comparative statement of revenues and expenditures, a statement of cash flow, a pie chart or graphics that shows our cash inflows and outflows, and then we have some financial reports, combined financial balance sheet, and revenue and expenditures. Some highlights from the explanation of financial data. We just completed the first month of the last quarter of this fiscal year, which ended on July 31st. So we continue to remain diligent in maintaining safety protocols to protect our students, our staff, and our stakeholders. MPS has also, as of July 31st, wrapped up its summer learning experience for over 12,000 students, and this provided them with a face-to-face opportunity to have some hands-on learning that some of the students may have missed out on during the school year due to COVID. As of July 31st, our overall general fund balance is approximately $58.2 million compared to $35.4 million during the same period last year. Also, our total expenditures as of July 31st totaled $174.5 million compared to $178.7 million last year. Of course, we've been notified of our second round of ESSER funds, which total approximately $59 million between the federal and the state. And most of those funds are geared towards student instruction and to catch up of learning losses due to COVID. It's also important to note that Montgomery Public Schools has exceeded our legislative required 1-month fund balance. And while the state requires us to have just a 1-month fund balance of approximately $18.4 million for this current fiscal year, we believe that we'll end the fiscal year 2021 with approximately 3 times that amount, somewhere between $51 to $55 million. As Mr. Watts maybe stated earlier, we still remain concerned about the loss in student population. Of course, a decline in student population also means that there's an impact on our state foundation funding. For this fiscal year coming up, fiscal year 2022, the state implemented a hold harmless amendment so that all districts that actually experience student loss would not be penalized. So we don't get the full effect of that this year or for the upcoming fiscal year. We're so thankful to the superintendent and the board for working together to make adjustments in various areas of expenditures, which has given us the opportunity to meet that state mandated 1-month fund balance and beyond. If you flip over to section 2, you'll see your snapshot analysis, which is a summarization of the month of July. You'll see that our actual revenues for July to date are $198,233,018. That's our year-to-date revenues as of July 31st. Our year-to-date expenditures are $174,473,417. And we have an ending fund balance, as previously stated, of $58,166,470. In that same box, you'll also see that our revenues compared to expenditures, or our actual revenues compared to budgeted revenues, are approximately 88.3%, and then our actual expenditures compared to the budgeted expenditures are at 79.1%. Also, in this snapshot, you get a view of our local revenues compared to last year, and then we also see at the very bottom there our general fund balance this year compared to last year. We flip over to the next section, we see that since July does represent the 10th month of the fiscal year, that means that our expenditures should be at approximately 83.33%, with 10 divided by 12 being 83.33. And as previously stated, with us being at 79.1%, we're a little bit under that, which is a good thing. The next section just shows a monthly and annual comparative statement that compares our revenues and expenditures month and year-to-date compared to the month and year-to-date of last year. And then we also have a statement of cash flows, which shows our actual for the month of July, and then it also gives you a year-to-date total as well for revenues, and then the same thing for expenditures, and a percentage per line item as it compares to the budgeted amount for each line item. The next section is stated we have our graphics or our visuals, our pie charts, which shows you what percentage of revenue year-to-date, how that compares. So you see our state sources are at 139 million compared to, well, the pie chart shows that that's 70% of our year-to-date revenues that have come in. And then we also have a visual of our outflows as well. The very last section shows our financial reports, and we have a combined balance statement that shows our total assets at 58.3 million, and then we also have our total liabilities is the same, and in that amount you will also see that we have a reserved fund balance, which are purchase orders, open purchase orders of $3.4 million, or approximately $3.5 million. We have a combined statement of revenues and expenditures, which shows our revenues, our general fund revenues year-to-date compared to our total expenditures. And you will see that our excess for the month, for year-to-date is about $23.7 million. And with that, with our beginning fund balance, leaves us a fund balance of $58.1 million, or approximately $58.2 million. And that's our financial statement for the month of July.
We continue to reserve money, and this is a great financial report. Anybody have questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have Mr. Anderson, Madison Park Community Center and Facilities Update.
Good evening, Dr. Moore, President Will, Vice President Mitchell, and members of the board. The Madison Park Community MOU with the city is a piggyback to the Floyd MOU that we did a while back with the paving project. The Floyd MOU is for the services of paving. The Madison Park MOU will help us cover some of the cost of the materials with that up to the appraisal value of that property. The intent of the city is to continue to use that as a community center for that area, and with their resources and manpower, I think they can do a great job in doing that something for the community there.
Any questions on Madison Park? Okay. Our facilities update?
The facilities update, of course, is a little bit short this month. Things will start to pick up. We've got several projects lined up with some ESSER funding, ETF, PSCA, and all coming up here shortly. But the Goodwin and Flowers roof, we've had the pre-construction meeting for that. We continue to see delays in materials. We're looking at November to receive the roofing materials to be able to proceed there with that, and that's starting to be a growing trend across construction materials with HVAC. We've seen it tremendously with HVAC and roofing materials, so that's where those two projects lie. The Brubaker HVAC is moving very rapidly. We were able to kind of get ahead on some things while they were out of the building, the students and the staff, and got that buttoned up this past weekend and cleaned up. And we only lack 2 mechanical rooms, replacing the air handlers in those 2 mechanical rooms in the upstairs area. We brought in portable air during the time that they'll be switching over, and they'll try to do that during off hours like the weekends, or they'll start like later Friday and through the weekend to try to limit, any kind of mitigate any kind of issues with the classrooms with those. But I've been in the building several times. It is much different environment than what it was just a year ago, and I encourage you to at some point, if that's your district, go by there and visit with the principal. It's looking really good in that area. New drop ceiling, new LED lighting. The HVAC is state of the art for the district. You have UVC and ionization in the air handlers, which will help with air quality. And we've also left the air purifiers that we had brought in prior to that. We've left those for the school as well to continue to use in their classrooms. So that project is coming along well. The Union Street elevator change order, I know that's coming up, but I'll explain that. That is days for delay. We had weather days, and then you also had the elevator. Those elevator parts are getting further and further out. It was initially a 12-week time frame on that. It turned into a 20-week time frame on that. So that's the cause for the additional days in the Union Street elevator change order. No additional cost to us on that. And then I also shared with you some BTW aerials, and I'll try to continue to do that each month so that you can see the progress. The weather, of course, has hit us a little bit. We have a lot of polished concrete in the building, so any kind of chance of rain, they've delayed on some of the slabs to put those in. So any water on those can really damage those polished concrete areas. So they've slowed down a little bit on some of the slab work, but the metal work continues to go well, and it's really starting to take shape out there. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
It's not a question, it's a comment at this time. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Moore, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, with the Brubaker complex, with Brubaker Middle School situation. I just found out what a chiller was, had no idea. But just thank you. In the school, the inside, I looked at the ceilings, they're beautiful. It looks like a new school just from the inside. And thank you for making sure the school was sprayed down and everything was cleaned up, and I saw some very happy teachers. So that means a lot.
Yes, ma'am. We tried to let the HVAC people get done what they were going to get done, and they were a little ambitious on this one, but it's really moving fast and getting ahead over there, and we should be out of there very quickly. And they've tried to just, limit as much, collateral damage and not having work going on while the teachers are in there, but we're isolated in those mechanical rooms, and it's moving really quickly and going well.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Gillis, guideline for COVID-19 related absences.
Good evening to our board chair, Will, and Vice President Mitchell, and to all of our other board members, and of course, Dr. Moore. In your packet, you should have received the guidelines for COVID-related absences. I want to start off by saying this is not the FFCRA. This is not the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I think it would look a little disingenuous if we had said that this was that and we didn't have all of the aspects of that in there. So this is our district's response to try to provide something for our employees as that comes to an end. It actually ends on September 30th, which is just in a few weeks. So what we came up with is we looked at where we are and how COVID is still affecting our employees and our schools and all of that. So the guidelines that we came up with, we hope will be very helpful to each and every one of our employees that have to experience this. And I'm going to go through these, and then if you have questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those. This is for any full-time employee with Montgomery Public Schools. They will receive or can receive 10 consecutive leave days. And this is at no expense to the employees. So they will still accrue their 1 day a month, or if they accrue vacation days, this is on top of that. And this will be for the following reasons. The employee has to have a positive test result. And of course, documentation will be required for that. The employee is a close contact at work. The employee's child, if their class is quarantined, whether it's in district or out, or if their school closes, then they could actually get those 10 days. And once again, documentation will be required for that. If the employee has to care for a spouse or a parent, then of course, they would also be able to use the 10 days. I want you to note that this is beginning after FFCRA. We did not opt into FFCRA the second time because we were in and out of school so much. So this would start the day after. It also gives us time for payroll and HR to put some things in place to make sure we can accommodate our employees. So it would start October 1st of this year and would end December 31st of this year. Then if we see that COVID is still spiking, if we still have those situations, I'm sure the superintendent will bring us back together to bring something else for you all to consider beginning in January. But we wanted to see how things were going from October, as hopefully more people get vaccinated and this calms down from October to December to have some coverage for our employees. This leave can only be used one time, and that's to keep down from abuse and making sure that we're doing this ethically and making sure that we're responsible fiscally. Because remember, this is at no expense to the employee. Mr. Watts and his team will take care of subs and those things. After this leave has been exhausted, if an employee exhausts this leave, the 10 days, then they will have to use their accrued leave. You've heard wonderful financial reports, and we want to stay there, but we do want to provide something for our employees. I want you to also know that all of the leave that is taken for this has to go through our program, which is called Talent Ed, and that's an online program, so they don't have to submit paper. They can go online and submit those documents, and that makes it COVID-free, so to speak, for them as well. This plan will be considered void if the board decides to approve this. It will be considered void if the federal government makes a mandate. Of course, it will supersede anything that we have to say. If we're required to do something different, then of course, we would adhere to whatever that mandate is. Questions?
I do, Kim.
Sure.
I just want clarification, okay?
Sure.
Then let me say it all, and then you go, you're wrong, you're right. Okay, my understanding from reading this is that teachers that have already missed so many days and complaining that they've had to take their 10 days that were not vaccinated. They had those 10 days, and then as of October 1 through December, they can have another 10 days, and possibly when January comes, that would start another 10 days. So we're looking at 30, possibly for some. And you just mentioned that we are trying to stop some of the ones that abuse it.
I agree.
Okay? I just want to bring that up. So what you're saying, I just want to know, was I right to hear that, obviously? That's what I heard.
I think I'm following you.
Okay.
Those that used it before, that had to be like over a year ago because we opted in because it was mandatory. But then during that phase where we were out more than we were in, we did not opt in. So they had to use their own accrued leave during that time. Up until this point, they've had to use their own accrued leave.
And this may not be the time to answer this, but I would like an answer sometime because I know me as a board member, and I would think other board members, if they open their email now, there is a very attacking email, okay, and I understand why some of these parents feel the way they do. Because if you look at it, elementary kids cannot get the shot. Right. They're not old enough. And this particular parent, if y'all got this email, this is not even my school, I will answer it though. When they're exposed to it with another child, they're sent, in this particular case, the child was exposed to it, sent home 10 days, comes back, spends 2 days, exposed to it again, sent home another 10 days. And both times is tested negative. So you can see this parent, especially with the news that I just gave y'all, when our proficiency rate are as low as they are, is there not something we can come up with when these children do test negative instead of just like if you look at the adults, I just want an answer for that parent because I totally understand her pain in her child not in school to get the education. Like she said, y'all have been open almost 4 weeks, my child's been there 1 week total. Is there not something we can do about that? If you look at the adults, if they have been vaccinated and they test negative, they can go back. What do we have in place for the children that test negative? Do y'all understand what I'm saying?
I understand completely what you're saying. Unfortunately, kids at that age can't be vaccinated. That's unfortunate.
So the answer is that it's policy. This is state policy, and there's nothing, because if y'all read this, it's attacking. It's like y'all voted for this policy. We didn't vote for that policy, did we?
No.
And that's state.
Everything that you
CDC, that's CDC. Okay, well then I have an answer.
Right.
Excuse me,
CDC.
if I'm not mistaken, isn't it sometimes even though they might test negative, there's an incubation period.
There is, and they can't
in which
test
they
out.
can take the test,
Right.
And then they're negative, but then in a couple of days,
Right.
it will show up. So that's why that is in place.
And Dr. Keefe, let me add as well, part of this is because we want people when they're sick not to come to work when they're sick. And we feel like if we give them those 10 days, then they will be honest and not come to work when they're sick. But kids, like I said, the ones that are under 12, they don't have that option, and they can't test out. Ms. Mitchell said it perfectly. There's that incubation period. So they may test negative that day. 2 days later, they may be positive, and then they've been at school and they've exposed more kids.
You've given me an answer.
Okay, so, and let me add something that's coming down the pike. I think I've alluded to it in some of my updates where I give you just a little brief statement about some activities that I might have been involved in. So I made you aware of a video that I participated in at UAB for testing for students. And now UAB has talked to me today and to Nurse Rogers, and they're going to, this is part of a grant, which is pretty massive. So they're going to start off with testing all of our elementary students with permission from the parents. They're going to bring in nurses, they're going to bring in people from the manufacturer of the test so that they can at least test students and get the results back within 24 hours. They're going to do it about twice per week. And hopefully, this will also help us in our mitigation of issues related to youngsters who cannot take the vaccine at this time. So that will give us another layer of prevention, hopefully. Of course, again, this is parental permission required. There will be a signed document that the parents sign. But with all of these things, we're hoping that we can keep more of our kids in school. The incubation piece that Ms. Mitchell mentioned, perhaps this test will give us information sooner rather than later. It is at no expense to the system. It is a part of an opportunity that was offered to us in MPS. And of course, I jumped on it as fast as I could before they offered it to somebody else. So that's coming down the pipe probably by the end of this month. We'll be able to start getting those permissions from the parents. And over time, we hope this will also keep our kids at school. And then the 10 days that we're talking about will also be another part of that layer of helping. And then also what we need to do right now, I think, is to ask parents and others to make sure that the social distancing and being close to relatives and friends over the weekend, perhaps when the kids are out of school, because we're finding that most of our students who come back with a possibility have gotten it somewhere else other than at school. So we're hoping that if everybody works together on this, we can greatly reduce the number of cases that we have in our school system.
Any other questions for Ms. Gillis about the teachers, this package for teachers?
Yes, I did have just one. For the employees who may have been impacted starting August 1st, will this as a suggestion, I mean, you all can think about it, but is there any way that we can go back and offer them this same opportunity to participate, cover those days that they missed? Because this sounds like from whatever the date was, October 1st, moving forward. And so that group would be left out. But is there any way to go back, if you all would just take that into consideration or as a suggestion to go back and look at the employees who were impacted starting August 1st?
Well, when we met initially, we met with the payroll department as well. Would be somewhat of a nightmare to try to figure all of that out and go back through the documentation, restore days, restore pay. And part of it is that they get those days anyway. They have sick leave days that they could have used that shouldn't have impacted them unless they were a brand new employee. So at this time, we're saying not retroactive. If the superintendent says something different, then by all means.
I had a very similar question, well, I first wanted to thank you for the positive response to meeting the needs of the teachers, because we have heard from a lot of our teachers. And I also was concerned about those persons who might have already been impacted prior to our implementing this on October 1. And I know it might be a logistical nightmare, you know, and I don't know if we can look at this case by case, or, you know, if teachers have already been pleading for assistance and we look at those cases, but, you know, I know I can't be prescriptive, but it is a very important concern, and I would love for us to be fair to all of our teachers. I would like to go back to one of Dr. Keith's questions to make sure that I understand, because she mentioned 10 days, 20 days, 30 days. Where we have here that this leave can only be used one time,
Right.
Is that for the school year or each time that we have an opportunity?
No, this is during the period of October 1st through December 31st, one time during that period of time. I think what Dr. Keith was referencing, and Dr. Keith, you can correct me if I'm gone, she talked about previously they were given days. So some of them may have gotten 10 days at some other time. Then she's saying 10 days again, and then if we bring this back to the board, that would be another 10 days. So she's thinking 10, 20, 30. Did I quote you right, Dr. Keith?
Okay.
Some of them actually missed this year. I'm not talking
Right.
about went all the way back to last year.
Right,
There are teachers that complained that they had not even started school for the
Right.
first, like, 14 days of school, and were complaining that they had to take their personal day.
right. Or for sick leave days.
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you. Dr. Moore?
All right. So Chad talked to you about the elevator change order, and there's no cost. It's due to weather, and I think we're asked to extend the days by about 3 days. So that change order does not involve any money. The other one is the renewal of the ATBE Automobile Fund participation, which we do every year in order to insure our vehicles that are owned by the board, and so that's what this particular contract renewal is about. I want to say before and I need 30 seconds, and I want to just say before we move out of this, that you have a lot of information on your work session agenda tonight, and they're the items that go all the way up through Q. And I want to say just to the staff and to let you know that every one of those items on that work session takes a lot of work. It is not just that it's listed and then it's brought to you. Each one of those items, from looking at a contract that a company has to offer and deciding whether or not we want to do it or not, to bring it to the point where we say to the board, here's this contract and here's why we think it's good. A lot of work has gone into deciding whether or not it is actually something that we ought to do or should do, and it's been perused by the staff. And I want to say in the financial pieces as well, facilities updates, all those things that we've added over the last couple of years, I want to say personally, thank you to the staff, because they spend a lot of time going through all of this, and I spend a lot of time going through all of this with each one of them. And so I want you to know it's not taken lightly. It's done with a lot of thought and a lot of work and a lot of gnashing of teeth sometimes, because we have to get together and discuss it and figure it out. And so I just want to give them a thank you, because they do a lot of hard work in order to get it to the point where we can put it on an agenda for your review. Mr. Rudolph as well, he reviews all of these contracts to make sure we're in compliance legally.
Okay. With that, I'm going to adjourn our work session, and with one swift, I'm going to open our board meeting. We're called to order, and I see we still have a quorum here. Can we get an approval of the agenda, please?
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda.
All in favor with a show of hands? Okay. And, next is me. You know I like to talk about good things happening in the system. Tonight's no different. First, I'd like to congratulate Jefferson Davis High School cheerleaders. They had an impressive performance at the Alabama State University cheer competition. They won second place in chant and second place in extreme routine. And excitingly, they won first place in cheer, first place in sequences, the Hornet Spirit Award, and Camp Grand champions. So does anybody want to help me give them a round of applause? Next, Principal Angela James Sampson from Pentlala Elementary School helped secure a $20,000 Walmart grant to be used to build an outdoor structure for PE classes and other school functions. Walmart also arranged for employees to help with the campus cleanup at the school and provided school supplies and athletic equipment. Also worthy of an applause for Walmart. Congratulations also to the Lamp High students who earned AP Capstone Diploma recognitions. 9 students earned AP Capstone Diplomas, and 2 others earned AP Seminar and Research Certificates. Next, congratulations to Brubaker Technology Magnet High. being named a National PTA School of Excellence in recognition of partnership between the school and its PTSA. Additional kudos go to science teacher and robotics coach Steve Ballard, who was awarded State Teacher of the Year by Air Force Association Chapter 102. And finally, our own Jana Bailey was spotlighted in this month's statewide publication of the Alabama Association of School Boards. Way to go, Jana. There's so many great things happening within MPS. Ms. Jones, I think you're up next.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, board members and Dr. Moore. Before we get started with our recognitions, we'd like to give the entire MPS staff a quick round of applause as we are all navigating through this pandemic still. So if we can just do that for all of our staff members as we continue to do that. And next up, Madam President, if I may ask if the entire board can come to the center of the stage for a quick picture. I just learned, as you all are convening to the center of the stage, that the Montgomery Public School Board has earned the Team Training Achievement Award, which is formerly known as the President Award. It is given to boards that have 60% of their members attend at least 3 AASB conferences, and all members meet the training requirements for the year ending June 30th, 2021. So a round of applause to our board members. Have you come? Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Alabama Association of School Boards Team Training Achievement Award. It's a great job, Montgomery Public School Board members. All right, let's give our board members another round of applause. Good deal. And as they make it back to their seats, we'll go ahead and jump right into our employee recognitions. Tonight, we're excited to share just a few employee recognitions with you all. Our first recognition comes from T.S. Morris Elementary School. Principal Easterling nominated Assistant Principal Mrs. Tamika Shepard. Mrs. Easterling shared that Mrs. Shepard is very innovative with strategies to help with scheduling as we transition to Power School. And she ensured that all the data was accurate and also assisted parents as we navigated through the first couple of days of school. So let's give Mrs. Shepard a huge round of applause. I don't think she's here tonight, but we'll be sure to give her her certificate and her gift card. And next up, we'd like to recognize Mrs. Cobb over at Danley Elementary. She serves as the bookkeeper. Assistant Principal Sewell shared that Mrs. Cobb is a true go-getter and is a true ambassador of Danley Elementary. She is always smiling, ready to help her parents, colleagues, and students. So we'd like to give Mrs. Cobb, who is the bookkeeper at Danley Elementary, a huge round of applause as well. And again, we'll make sure that they receive their gift cards and their certificates via mail tomorrow morning. Madam President.
Thank you. We appreciate our staff, teachers, everybody, custodians. We really appreciate the work they do every day, day in and day out. Okay, next up we have some scheduled public comments. If I may read the instructions here, request must be made in advance in writing to the superintendent's office by 4:30 on the Tuesday preceding the meeting date. Request must have specified the nature of the business to be taken up with the board and the name of the person who will address the board to be added to the agenda. Communications must be respectful. Discussing specific student or employee matters will not be allowed. Individuals who have concerns that are inappropriate to be solved in this venue are welcome to seek a problem-solving meeting with the superintendent. Immediate feedback by the board may not be provided. However, you may be contacted for follow-up by the superintendent or her designee. Public comments may not exceed 3 minutes. The board chairman has full authority to terminate the remarks of any person whose comments contain personal attacks, exceed the time limit, or are otherwise inappropriate. A speaker may be considered disruptive who continues to speak when their allotted time has ended, when asked to stop speaking by the board chairman, or is otherwise inappropriate. If a person fails to comply when asked to terminate comments, he or she will be escorted to their seat, out of the auditorium and/or off MPS property, depending on the level of disruption. And our first public comments tonight come from Mrs. Margaret Brooks on leadership.
Members of the board, I would first like to address the matter of establishing a search committee for the new superintendent. I believe the committee should be representative of our community. Members should, at minimum, include teachers, principals, parents, clergy, business leaders, and inner-city leaders. Failing to include individuals who are truly invested in our community will lessen the likelihood of finding a superintendent who embodies these same values. It is crucial that we have people on board searching for someone who will not allow what happened last year with our students to ever occur again. We are in need of someone who will take lead so as not to have our community up in arms as it has been since the onset of this school year. A direct result of failing to have in place a detailed plan despite our pleading. Providing a solid plan in advance, since we already knew what was coming, would have alleviated all of the concerns and what-ifs we have all endured. The first few weeks of school have been chaotic and confusing at best, and for absolutely no good reason. I believe it is fair to say that the MPS community social media boards certainly have a number of comments that would be better received if worded differently. That said, I cannot help but note that while we may not all be fighting for the same thing, the general consensus and common denominator is that everyone is shouting that a lack of leadership and failure to communicate effectively is the root of all our problems. Regardless of whether someone is voicing concern about anything from protocol for quarantining to failing to receive information for students whose schools have gone virtual, it all boils down to the fact that effective communication from the top down through the ranks is non-existent. I find it ironic that over the years, so many things within our school system have been blamed on a lack of parent and community involvement, and yet we are humiliated when we go before the board to express concerns. It seemingly falls in line with a dictatorship, as when we as parents send emails, the responses we receive are vague at best and offer no valuable information. Further, although permitted to speak at board meetings, provided we have made it through the ridiculous protocol for getting on the agenda, just prior to speaking at board meetings, we are informed we will get no response or feedback. I encourage you to imagine yourself standing before a Board of Education of all things, where you are a parent seeking answers not only for yourself but for other fellow parents, and doing so for the sake of children who cannot fight for themselves, only to realize that the hurdles you jumped to get to speak and words you spoke fell on deaf ears. Sadly, the MPS community boards, social media boards, are starting to fill with comments of people encouraging each other to write to board members and share their concerns, but little do they know yet that their efforts will be futile and their time wasted at best. They will get a response that will skillfully avoid addressing your concern. The time for change is long past due, and our children's education will continue to suffer until we retain a leader who is in it for the purpose of building a positive future and ensuring it through facilitating a plan structured to meet the needs of all students in our currently ever-changing status as we continue to navigate school life through a pandemic.
Next, we have Mrs. Rebecca Baker, of MPS COVID Protocol and Procedures.
I would like to address you all on the COVID protocol used by MPS. As a parent, I still have received nothing from MPS with the procedures we, as a school system, are following to address COVID. I want to walk you through one specific situation that happened at MPS. My 8-year-old was sent home with COVID symptoms. I gave him a home COVID test, which was negative, and then scheduled a pediatrician's appointment that same day where he was again tested negative. The pediatrician stated in a note that my son should return to school the next day. I called the school and was told that he could not return to school. He could return to school after 10 days because he possessed 2 of the major COVID symptoms. I then discovered 8 students in my son's class had been sent home due to a positive exposure. I also found a letter was sent home to the remaining students stating, and I quote, "This letter is to inform you that an individual in your child's classroom has been diagnosed with COVID-19. While your child was not specifically identified as a close contact of the positive individual, we encourage you to watch for COVID symptoms of COVID-19 in your child." I knew the letter was referencing my son because if there was more than one student deemed positive, the entire class would have been sent home, and they weren't. My son was also counted in the positive COVID count of MPS being reported, although he was negative. 2 days later, another student in the class was reported positive, so the entire class was sent home for 10 days. My son returned fulfilling his 10 days and was the only student in his class for an entire week. Why do I share this story with you? Because the way the numbers and positive cases are being communicated to parents and the public is extremely misleading. To tell a parent their child was exposed when in fact To tell a parent their child was exposed when in fact they were not causes unnecessary stress on families. Also, the positive count of MPS should only include those that are actually positive. For the parents that think a virtual option is best for their children, who am I to argue with them? They know what's best for their children, but there are numerous virtual options available. Alabama Connections Academy, for example, is an accredited public school where all Alabama education and high school graduation requirements are met, and the tuition is free. I will end with a quote from a teacher I talked to several weeks ago. The damage virtual schooling has done to the children is already so obvious. I'm 100% behind having a thorough, well-communicated COVID plan that protects the children and keeps them in a face-to-face learning environment. COVID's not going anywhere, and we're going to have to address this for each year for the foreseeable future. We have got to give our nurses in the schools some discretion, and we can't totally ignore what doctors are saying about a child's health. An 8-year-old can't explain his symptoms. He might accidentally say he can't smell when he means he can't breathe. And then 2 days later, 17 children are at home due to exposure when most of them haven't been exposed to anything other than the chaos and stress of learning from home.
We have next Ms. Kelly Phelps, in-person education. Okay. Ms. Carolyn King, BTW Band Program.
Thank you for allowing a parent to speak tonight. I appreciate the work that you do. I will never forget the first time driving up to Auburn High School Performing Arts Center. We thought we were at Carnegie Hall. Practice rooms, equipment we could only dream of, and a performing arts stage. An amazing experience for my daughter being selected for the district band, and even better than the performing space and expert teaching, the end result of being able to see this band achieve a level of musical expertise in 2 days that she had only dreamed of. I believe the beautiful functional space at Auburn High School and the expert teaching allowed that band to achieve at that accelerated level. And then we had to drive back to Montgomery, to Floyd Middle Magnet, and then to Hayneville Road, BTW. Sad, knowing the inequality of our schools here. But we stay and we try to make them better. You can only imagine how thankful we are when the property was bought on Bell Road. I want to thank you for that vision and hope. For BTW performing at a level equal to Auburn was palpable in our music community when that happened. And then COVID has hit us hard, and BTW this past year was in a bad spot with no band director. A very talented band director was sought and hired. I was home for virtual school. I saw him teach as a professional that I expected. The students had to be accountable, and they learned difficult music theory when there was no safe plan for face-to-face. Some teachers at BTW did not even show up for classes, and I don't think you really want to know that. Then the band director did the second job he was hired for this past year, transitioning to our new building. He's been looking at blueprints, purchased instruments, and desks. Imagine his shock this past summer when his medical insurance changed and he was informed by someone in our music community that he had been replaced. This former director is a product of our own Elmore County. He marched in Auburn's band. He has over 25 years teaching experience, and he has built 2 of the most respected band programs in this state. He demonstrates amazing musical abilities playing in the Montgomery Symphony. He is kind. He is a gentle soul, respectful of all. I'm sure you did not know any of that last July when you approved the recommended teachers list. I'm not sure how much is just reflex. I know politics are strong and that administrators do not have to account to me as a parent about personnel matters. That has been made very clear. I am just a parent of a very talented 10th grader whose hopes have been seemingly dashed by the replacement of the band director at BTW. I am asking tonight for one or two things. Number one, the next time a slate of proposed teachers comes across your desk, that you would give a little more thought to and ask questions about highlighted hirings. BTW's band programs are loved and they have been strong, and with the new Performing Arts Center that's been proposed, they were a contender to be on par with Auburn and just a few other high schools in this state. I do not know how this teacher was hired, the new one. We needed a director who has proven himself at building public school band programs with musical expertise and years of experience. There's been no communication back to the former band director concerning emails and phone calls he made all this past summer concerning his non-rehire after being pink-slipped. The second thing I would ask for is just that amends be made. Thank you.
Madam President, if I could speak, please. Thank you. I want to the parents that came up, first of all, I want to thank you for coming. I want you to know you were heard. I want you to know that I, too, was out there before I was ever on the board. It is because I was out there that I'm on the board. The public got behind me. Now, what I do take offense to, okay, is you have 7 ladies and a superintendent that I'm going to say have done one bang-up job of trying. We are not the CDC. You heard me stand up here and ask for that parent that said, hey, what about that parent? That child doesn't get to go to school. I get it, but that's not a policy we made. And to sit out there and have your thumb up to people that really care about you, we've sat in meetings just 2 weeks ago that said, hey, Lisa, what's the protocol for answering emails? Well, I said, oh, you want us to pass the buck? I don't want to pass the buck. I want to give you the answers that you want. All of us said we need to have a town hall meeting where we can talk back to you. I'm not supposed to be talking back to you now, but I feel for you, I get it, but to attack the leadership that we don't know about COVID, I'll admit it, and you don't either. So what I'm trying to tell you is to be patient. I appreciate you getting up there, but to attack this leadership up here and our superintendent, who has if you look what our city has now, we have taxes for better schools, we have a new school being built, we have people coming up for you to have now 30 days for our teachers. Do we listen to our teachers? Yes, somewhat too much. But do we listen to our parents? Every one of us do, or we wouldn't be up here. Thank you.
We also have a couple of people who have signed up for comments, for citizens' comments. I would remind you that what these comments refer to something that is on our agenda items. You can sign up prior to the meeting. Citizens' comments must be on agenda items only. Forms for citizens' comments will be available 30 minutes before regularly scheduled board meetings. Agenda topics to be addressed must be identified on the form in order to speak. Individual citizens' comments may not exceed 3 minutes. A total of 30 minutes are allotted for all citizen comments. Communications must be respectful. Discussing a specific student or employee matters will not be allowed. Individuals who have concerns that are inappropriate to be solved in this venue are welcome to seek a problem-solving meeting with the superintendent. Immediate feedback by the board may not be provided. However, you may be contacted for follow-up by the superintendent or designee. The board chairman has full authority to terminate the remarks of any person whose comments contain personal attacks, exceed the time limit, or are otherwise inappropriate. A speaker may be considered disruptive who continues to speak when their allotted time is ended, when asked to stop speaking by the board chairman, or is otherwise inappropriate. If a person fails to comply when asked to terminate comments, he or she will be escorted to their seat, out of the auditorium, and/or off MPS property, depending on the level of disruption. And first we have up Cassandra Cheatham on financial statement.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to speak to some things that I heard as it relates to the financial report. $250 million from the Special Revenue Fund allocated for instructions. Should not our schools be safe for the kids and teachers and staff? Kids' attendance is declining per the financial report we just heard. So why is the virtual option not an option for parents or teachers? These schools are not properly being cleaned and can be proven. Whole football teams are sick, kids and teachers are sick, elementary school kids cannot be vaccinated. This option will allow teachers and kids to be safe for those who choose the options. Those who want to stay, they stay. For those who want to take the virtual option, there should be a choice that should not have ever been taken away from parents. Communication via several phone calls and emails have been sent on this matter before Labor Day to the superintendent office, along with Jay Jones, with absolutely no response back. With no hey, no comment, it's being considered. Nothing is said to us parents. Putting 500 people in one building every day is creating a pandemic within a pandemic. Having this option will decrease the classroom sizes. More students will be lost through sickness and parents seeking a K-12 option to keep our kids safe. We are taxpayers. We should not have to seek other options for our kids. Why should they have to actually graduate online with friends they have had since junior high or elementary schools? Our voices should be heard, and we should be communicated properly from MPS. This is supposed to be a partnership. Parents are concerned. Understandable that you guys are concerned with the educational part of it. However, schools should not reopen without the virtual options. Our kids and lives are being put on the line for funding. I've sat in this room since 4 o'clock. I took off for this. And I've heard a lot of funding for curriculum, for buildings, et cetera, but I have heard nothing to keep our kids safe at the end of the day. Thank you.
Next we have Latidra, I can't read is it Walsh? Is that correct? On the financial statement.
Hi, I'm Latidra. So I'm just basically picking back off of what Cassandra said. It is about the finances. I heard everything that was discussed, how it was going to be used, but I also feel like that
Excuse me, could you take your mask off so we can hear?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I said I've sat here since 4 o'clock as well, and I heard how all of the money was going to be dispensed, what it was used for, but I don't feel like it benefited the safety of our children when it comes to 7 schools had to be closed down because of COVID and because of I saw the plan where they have to quarantine for 10 days plus an additional 14 days. That's 24 days. You know, parents have to take off work And then you're talking about, well, they lost a lot of knowledge last year, but they 24 days, so once they quarantine, they come back, and then if somebody else tests positive, they got to quarantine again. How are they learning? I'm just saying, I'm a concerned parent. We did well with virtual last year. I don't understand why that option wasn't given to us this year. And I feel like Dr. Mackey said that the reason why they need face-to-face is because of mental health, but what is it doing to their mental health now? It's affecting them. I mean, I don't think nobody's taking that into consideration. I heard what the other parents said. I understand what you said, and I appreciate everybody, what you guys are doing for our children. I appreciate the board and everything, but something needs to change better than what's happening now, because it's not benefiting nobody. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Dr. Moore on a consent agenda.
Thank you. So we'll get into the consent agenda. I recommend approval of the items listed under the consent agenda, A through L.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move approval of the consent agenda items A through L as recommended by the superintendent.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? That's unanimous. Dr. Moore?
I recommend approval, and we'll go item by item on these. The FY 2022 budget.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 2022 budget.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? Opposed?
I'm for it.
Okay, then it's unanimous. Dr. Moore?
Okay. I recommend approval of the proposed academic and other school support salary supplements.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for B, proposed academic and other school support salary supplements.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Dr. Moore?
I recommend approval of the 2022 salary schedule.
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for C, the fiscal year 2022 salary schedule.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? That is unanimous. Dr. Moore?
I recommend approval of the guidelines for the COVID-19 related absences.
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for guidelines for COVID-19 related absences.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? That is unanimous.
I recommend approval of the personnel report, certified personnel.
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for E, personnel report, certified personnel.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? And that's unanimous.
I recommend approval of the personnel report, classified personnel.
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for F, personnel report, classified personnel addendum.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? Okay, unanimous.
I recommend approval of the personnel report, classified addendum.
Madam President, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for personnel report, classified personnel.
Second.
Any discussion? Show of hands? Unanimous.
I recommend approval of the personnel report, certified teams.
Madam President, I move to accept the superintendent's recommendation for approval of item H, personnel report certified teams.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? And that's unanimous. Our next meeting is October the 12th at 5 o'clock, a work session. It'll be right here at Carver. And with that,